Well, you would be hard pressed to find someone as talented as a storyteller as my guest today, Amar Shah. You've seen his work, you've read his work, ESPN, Fox, NFL Network, the list goes on, the Orlando Magic. He has carved out, in many respects, a very fruitful career in sports media. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor at Fox Sports Radio. And over all these years that Amar Shah has been in the business, he has accumulated a lot of great adventures and great experiences with some of the biggest names in sports. So we're going to talk about his stories and what he's been able to do in his life. He is on Twitter at Amar Shahism. I'm on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. And Amar, as I welcome you in here, I hear that Twitter handle, Amar Shahism. So if that's a philosophy, what is Amar Shahism?
Brian, it's great to chat with you. So Amar Shahism is a kind of a joke. I don't really believe in any isms, but I had a friend who had an ism in her screen name back in 1996, and I kind of borrowed it, and I thought it was a really clever way to kind of just discuss a philosophy of life where it's just about having fun, telling great stories and enjoying life.
Well, you told a lot of great stories in your book, Wish I Was a Baller. So I encourage everybody to get that. And we'll certainly talk more about that over the course of this discussion. But speaking of stories, I saw not long after Kobe Bryant passed away, Amar, you had this really nice thread in describing your interactions and experiences with him. How to this day do you keep his aroma and his presence with you in everything you do?
you know the Mamba mentality is something I remember he had even before he was Kobe Bryant. I was really lucky that in 1996, even before he made it to the NBA, before he stepped foot onto a court, I had a chance to meet him. I was a young writer for Slam magazine, and all of the rookies of the class of 1996 came to Orlando for their rookie premiere. I think this was like in September of 1996, and it was Kobe, Steve Nash, Allen Iverson, Stephon Marbury, Mark. I mean, I mean, there were so many Hall of Famers in that class, and I and a friend of mine kind of crashed the party at one of the hotels because I knew the writers from Slam were going to be there. And even though they told me not to go as a 16-year-old, you can't really tell someone of that age not to kind of go. And so I kind of crashed the party, as I like to say, and then got a chance to kind of just end up just talking with Kobe. He was 2 years older than I was at the time. He was more famous for kind of taking Brandy to the prom than he was. I remember he had a broken thumb at that point, so he was wearing a giant, I think Adidas sweatshirt, and we just ended up chatting. We weren't talking about, oh, he's making it to the NBA, and we were talking about high school. We were just talking about what it was like, just to be in that circumstance, graduation, and it was just like talking to him for 30 minutes was such a great, just like talking to a normal, not even a normal person. It was like talking to a friend or a classmate.
Wow.
Um, and I remember it was such an impressionable time for me because he was not the player that he would later become. And so, flash forward 2 years later, for some oddball reason, our high school was always the area where NBA teams like to practice. From the Chicago Bulls to the Indiana Pacers to the Washington Bullets at the time, they all were at our high school at one point or another. And then the LA Lakers came during my senior year. So this includes Shaq when he kind of was a trader to Orlando and went to LA, and then Kobe came. And I remember he recognized me from that conversation that we had 2 years before, because it was just one of those where it was just a natural camaraderie, and we ended up just they had practice, and after practice we just hung out for like 45 minutes chatting and kind of talking about like what life was like in the NBA. I remember he had his fro back then, and it was just so natural. And I remember one of the coolest things is that he gave his shoes to one of our basketball players, and I didn't find that out till some many years later. And then he gave me his practice jersey, and he signed it, and it was incredible. I actually later gave it to my brother, who's a huge Kobe fan. But the fact that I had these two crazy moments with him at such a young age, because he was 18 and probably 20 at the time, and the fact that he remembered me was awesome. And just to see his career blossom, it was like watching someone grow with you, even though obviously it's a different trajectory. But I was lucky enough to go into the world of sports. I got to watch his 81 point game when I worked on Sports Center, so I got a chance to work that night and just kind of watch history take place. So it was really incredible to see such an amazing career. And obviously, that it broke our hearts, when the tragedy occurred. But you kind of take that inspiration that he was to so many people. And I just remember, knowing kind of like, I don't even know if I knew him, but just having those two really cool interactions with him that were sometimes you meet someone for an instant and they have an influence for you for a lifetime. And I feel like that was that for me.
What was it during those conversations with him, especially the second one, where you saw greatness in his eyes?
There was a work ethic there. He was still practicing even when everyone left. And there was a humility for him at that age, I think. Sometimes he was different to different people when he was younger, but for me there was always a level playing field of just chatting with him because I wasn't talking to him as Kobe Bryant NBA player. I was just talking to him to like Kobe and Amar just hanging out, or just having a natural conversation with two people in the late 90s would have. We were talking about, his Slam magazine cover, just talking about, rap music and hip hop and who he was listening to at the time. So it was just a small conversation, but the fact is it was so memorable for me. And I just saw that here was, and I think he was in 2000 when we really kind of had that breakout career. But I knew there was something special there, even though he wasn't starting at that point, and he was still kind of a young rookie and a young player in the league. But you knew there was something special that he was about to bring into the future, and he kind of manifested that in his future Hall of Fame career.
There's a lot of special things that you brought into your career as well as it continued. We're joined by Amar Shah, producer extraordinaire. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor at Fox Sports Radio. And Amar, as voracious as your appetite has been for the NBA and growing up and following all the legends and being so closely invested in the sport, how close were you to wanting to get in the NBA yourself? I know you're a big basketball junkie here.
Um, I still at a I was lucky enough to turn 40 last year, and I still have aspirations uh to play. I joke I still have some of my champion jerseys from when I was a kid. And even though I've added a little weight, they still kind of fit. So, I still have my Muggsy Bogues. I have all my Knicks jerseys from Patrick Ewing and John Starks. And, I still love to play. I still like to ball out, and I still have that aspiration that one fine day I'll be able to get on that court and play. And it's always fun to play ball with my son because he's going to be able to steal the ball at some point, but right now I can still dunk on him. So it does gratify that high school, that immature part of me that always wanted to duck on someone.
Yeah, you might as well savor those moments because I don't think they're going to last long. Your son is going to eventually be dunking on you, and then he
Yes.
will get the last laugh. We are joined by Amar Shah, producer extraordinaire. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor at Fox Sports Radio. And Amar, we're here sitting and talking about your own pursuits in basketball, and there's no better way to see that and what it the sport means to you than the title of your book, "Wish I Was a Baller." How, by you putting out your thoughts, your experiences in the game, has it become a cathartic experience for you?
The book to me was I like to say 25 years in the making. When my son was born in 2015, some people go through a lot of different things in their head, a way to look back and want to do something for their kids. And for me, putting that adventure that I lived when I was in high school, on paper, is something that I wanted for them. I wanted them to know that, their dad lived among, and during a time period and experienced things that shaped the course of his life. And I wanted to revisit those stories and those situations, and it was painful at times to kind of talk about some of those things, but it was also pretty awesome to look back and think that I was able to live a fairy tale existence for any kid. And being able to actually pour my thoughts over 4 years it took me to write that book. I think the first draft was around 115,000 words, and then looking back and being able to then put it together, working with an agent, and then finally getting out there to publishers. I'm really looking forward to see what happens with it. I know it's been picked up as an option so far for a show, so I'm really excited about that. But I'm really looking forward for people to check it out. And obviously, the title comes from the classic Skilo song "I Wish"
Of
of
course.
1995. And so the book is set between 1995 and 1996. And, it just covers my crazy adventure covering the NBA as a sophomore in high school during the great Shaq and Penny years here in Orlando. But it's about that, and it's about a lot of different things, including, my Indian American identity. What was it like growing up, as I like to say, as a counter kid, growing up in a gas station during my early years, and then also falling in love with basketball. And then, it's got all the coming of age plot points, the girl that I could never get, the quest to be popular, being Indian American and what that meant, and exploring that identity. And so, it's all in there. And I look forward, especially for my son one day and my daughter one day to read it.
When it comes to exploring your identity and talking about the sacrifices your parents made in coming to the United States, I saw something you had mentioned, Amar, not long ago, where you described immigrant moms are the unsung heroes of this country. Individually, in your family's experience, why does that resonate so much to you?
I was incredibly inspired, obviously when, our new VP was of Indian origin, and because it inspired me to look back at my mom. And my mom came to this country, in 1975. She was 19 years old. She had never been anywhere outside of India at that point. And, you know, my mom and my dad both had, a quasi arranged marriage. And so, for them, to get to know each other, to grow up here, and then looking at my mom and all the sacrifices that she made for my brother and I. She didn't speak a word of English, but she learned. She didn't know how to drive. She learned how to drive and work and, create a life for herself with my dad. And them, working together in the gas stations and in the convenience stores of, kind of being partners in crime. And, I like to joke my dad's tough, but my mom is way, way tougher. And she taught me that, that grit and that perseverance and it's tenacity to go after what you want in life. And I'm very lucky that, she continues to inspire me to this day. And I feel like a lot of, many immigrant moms are similar to her, but, and they have that incredible work ethic, that thing that just inspires their kids to kind of go after that thing that they want because they put their dreams on hold so we could live ours.
You speak about the way in which your mom has motivated you and being that influential presence. How has your dad inspired you?
Both of them have had the same amount of inspiration because it's their story that continues to drive me. I was lucky to be able to tell my dad's story to a wider audience in the Washington Post a couple of years ago. And my dad came to this country when he was 17 years old. um, had he had a mustache, came on, a suit, came to Air India here to, America during that crazy year of 1968, as a student, became an electrical engineer, got his master's. And then all of a sudden he did a complete 180 and decided, you know what? I don't want to work for somebody else. I want to be my own person. And, for the last 40 years, he's just been in an entrepreneur. And so every day I look at them, and he just turned 70 this year, continues to inspire me to kind of pursue my own dreams because I don't think anything stopped him from going after it. It didn't matter if a business didn't do well, he would go and he would succeed in something else. So it was that perseverance in life that continues to kind of inspire me today. And I look at how hard they worked, so we could go and pursue our dreams. And to me, I'm just very fortunate and very lucky that I was able to take inspiration from them, to go after the things that I want in my own life.
When did you have to apply that perseverance you're talking about most in your life? A specific moment where you really had to dig for that trait?
I think I look back on it It was definitely times during, high school, my own career, college, but even in your career as you grow, you're always going to be tested. You know, things are not in your control, but how you react to them is something that's in your hands. And so I looked at my dad, and he went through different things. My parents went through different things, but the one thing they always had was an attitude that, what, the past is the past, time to move forward and look to what the next adventure is. And for me, I remember situations of moving from LA to LA, and moving to Bristol and being on my own. And then how are we going to do this? Like, my wife and I were in a place we'd never been in LA. And how are we going to survive? But we ended up, living there, thriving there, starting a family there. So I just look at my parents' inspiration of coming all the way to India with nobody here, and seeing how they created a life for themselves. I couldn't do half of what they did. And so, coming halfway means a lot to me so far.
Speaking of somebody who has been so welcoming and so open and such a great guy is Neil Everett, somebody who you have worked with at ESPN. And like you, I have met him and certainly have not worked with him like you have, but he's someone who I look at as a mentor who checks on me from time to time periodically. But from those experiences with Neil, Amar, what distinguishes him from anybody else you've ever worked with?
Neil will sacrifice anything to make something better. And I always like to joke, and he and I used to always joke that we were the Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro of Sports Center highlights. I had a great camaraderie. Very oftentimes you get a chance to work with someone who's willing to do whatever crazy idea came to your head, and no matter how he looked, he was willing to go through with it. I mean, I had that poor guy dress up as Albert Einstein. I had him, dress up as Dr. Frankenstein. I had him, do a Harry Potter highlight. You name it, he was. I remember we did a food highlight, and he was Emerald Lagasse. He just has, I think it's his Hawaiian background, but he's just so chill, so laid back, and and it's someone who is he's just a nice guy, and he believes in you as much as you believe in him. And I think having someone trust you to know that you're going to do something cool and crazy and out of the box, he was the perfect person to collaborate with. And I'm still very lucky to this day, to have that bond with him. And we had a lot of fun together.
Oh, I can only imagine. He's caring, he's selfless. He also has a great voice. So he's got it all and he loves to give back. And speaking of somebody who's given a lot to you as far as inspiring your creative juices on the writing side, I know you've been big in terms of your admiration for Scoop Jackson. And so, where are you as a writer, as someone who thinks of creative ideas, if it weren't for the presence of Scoop Jackson?
Oh man, I mean, as any '90s kid growing up reading Slam magazine, if you weren't inspired by Scoop Jackson or read his work, it's crazy because he's someone that I actually had a chance to. He kind of mentored me in high school during that crazy sophomore year. He would give me a call to check in on me. I still remember reading his work. I remember he was able to create scenes. I could visualize things in my head by the way he would describe them. And I just remember the way there's nothing like a Scoop Jackson sentence. There really isn't. And I early on modeled, try to mimic, the great writers that inspire you at the time. And I remember just trying to like, sound like Scoop Jackson and write like Scoop Jackson. And then I remember he was someone who always said things happen for a reason. And I think I had a chance to, meet him in 1996. He actually took me to Michael Jordan's restaurant and we had lunch there. And, he ended up going to ESPN. I ended up going to ESPN. And so, periodically, we'll check in with each other. But for me in high school at that age, I don't think I was under any in getting a chance to be mentored by a writer you admire. I mean, there's no better way to become a better writer.
Did you view yourself in high school as sort of a writing prodigy?
No, no. I was more of a I now I look back, I wanted to be something I probably wasn't, but I think I just had moxie to kind of go after the thing that I wanted. And I was like, if why can't I do this? Nothing was gonna stop me. writer, I think even as you get older, writing is something you think you're good at, but then you realize you get better as you get older, as you gain more life experience. And for me, just because I read, the classics and read some of the great writers and try to mimic them, you feel it at some point that, oh, I can do this, but it's hard work. And I think, at that point, I probably did feel like I could be something. But and as I look back on it now, I'm really excited, to have that adventure that I had to become the writer that I am now.
How has your writing voice differed from when you were first starting? We're talking about your high school years to where you are now as a writer.
I think it's finding your voice. I remember reading about like sort of like Hunter Thompson talking about how he used to, use a typewriter and write Hemingway and Fitzgerald novels just to get the cadence and the rhythm. And, early on, I was very pseudo Fitzgerald. Like I would write these like opulent sentences and try to write these grandiose stories. And as I began to filter through that, as I read other writers, and as I began to find my own voice. And I think especially when you take on the Herculean task of trying to write your own book, you begin to find that voice, and that voice for me has always been there. And as I've gotten older, it's just becoming more and more authentic to who I am, and not somebody that I wanted to be when I was younger.
What's it like finding that voice as a dad?
I think, all of us are in different seasons of our life. And I think the person that I was before I had my kids and the person I have after my kids is totally different because it gives me a purpose. And so when I tell stories now, it's more for longevity. I still, and it's for something for that they can read and then they can understand and learn something for. So I think as a writer, becoming a parent has taught me patience. It's taught me to take my time and to do things um, with the dexterity that I never had before. It's all about, writing now for them and what, because for me that's my audience. So that's what it kind of boils down to is when I look at them, I'm more inspired than I was ever before.
You write for them, but you also have started this writing project with your son. What do you hope to get accomplished by that?
So yeah, so the writing project has been really one of the fun things that I remember I there was a baseball card shop in LA that I used to go to, and one of the owners had this project where he would write to baseball players, basketball players, obviously for autographs, but then he would obviously he would use his son almost in a way to kind of write to these players, but you got a chance to be a kid again and explore that, that childlike curiosity of writing. And I remember being younger and writing to different players, hoping that you get that card signed back. And, now with the internet, you can get addresses and you can reach out to people. And with my son, I wanted not to just write to baseball or basketball players for autographs. I wanted to write to different people to get their life experience. So my son could kind of look back on his own life or and look at the lessons that other people lived and learn something from there. And whether it was like Regis Philbin or Dr. Jane Goodall or Colin Powell or or Arnold Palmer, all of these people wrote back to my son Neil deGrasse Tyson. And now he has something that he can look back on, and he may not understand who these people are now, but he'll be looking through that those envelopes with those cards and those letters and seeing something that hopefully will inspire him to become the person he will one day. And I'm also starting the same project with my daughter as well. Her name's Annika, so I think writing to Annika Sorenstrom is going to be a good start.
Yes. Amar Shah is our guest. I'm Bryan Fenley. If you were to write a letter yourself, Amar, hoping desperately to get a reaction, a response, sports, business, professional life, idol, who is it? Who would be that one person that it would mean the most to you to get a response back from?
Oh wow, that is a great question. If there's living or past.
Either way, let's go living or past.
Okay, so past, I would definitely love to write to F. Scott Fitzgerald. Actually, no, you take that back. I would like to write to Zelda Fitzgerald, his wife, because
Ah,
I, I, as talented as a writer as F. Scott Fitzgerald was, getting a letter from Zelda would be something totally awesome because she was more of a creative personality in the way she would churn out a turn of phrase is something I've never heard before. So I'd love to get an authentic letter from her. Currently living, that is a tough one. I would love to write to somebody like I want to pick one of these Fortune 500 people, but I'm I'm a little baffled right now. So I'm gonna say I would love to write to, you know what? I'm gonna pick somebody from my past. I'd love to write a letter to Daryl Strawberry.
Wow.
And the reason I would like to write to Daryl Strawberry is not, obviously he was my favorite player. It was the first name I knew growing up. But I also look at someone who's lived in a such a life that's had up and downs, and from the height of fame to the bottom, the bottom of jail to being able to find redemption and become the person he is now. At this moment, he would be the type of person that I would want to write to because here you have someone who's kind of triumphed, in the face of adversity and whatever he's become to become a better person than he was a baseball player.
The time you wrote, and I know we're going off a little bit back to your earlier part of your career, but you wrote a piece on Sean Respert.
Oh wow, yeah.
I wanted to dig back into that and sort of what you were trying to get across in that piece.
So Sean, it was interesting. That piece that I wrote on Sean Respert was my very first article that I wrote for Slam magazine. Um, for me, that story was also, I look at Sean Respert because he himself has had such a crazy career. Here you had one of the top shooters and 3-pointers, in college when he was in Michigan State. And then he kind of got caught in that tweener stage. Like nobody knew really how tall he was or what he was going to do. And I kind of looked at my own self and I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of a tweener, and then so I saw an idea there. And I remember NBA Live was the video game we all played. And so I was like, this is the perfect article to write. And so Slam gave me the green light to get a press credential. And then I ended up interviewing him. And it was really cool because I got a chance to interview, was it Ben Baker and then Glenn Big Dog Robinson at the time. And for a 15-year-old, getting the interview, not only getting the interview, I remember that night writing or the day after writing that story. And I'm like, oh God, I hope the editors like it. And they ended up liking it and they ended up publishing it.
Wow.
So for me, that was my very first piece. And then, seeing what, Sean Respert was actually battling cancer at the time, a couple years after, and he's triumphed over that. And just to see what he's done with his career, it's been pretty cool to see, where you go, at a certain junction in your life from where you've been.
If you were to be interviewed after you ran the 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine, what am I going to hear from Amar?
If I have to give my Daniel Jeremiah rating, I would definitely
Yes.
say slow, not fleet of foot, style of points for the fedora, so he knows how to finish, but definitely will show speed in game situations, not necessarily someone who, and that's being very generous to myself because I was very slow. I like to give the excuse that I was drinking a Coca-Cola and I had a spasm. And so there is some truth to that. But the fact is I didn't do very well on it, but I did get style points for the fedora.
Do you
And
remember the time?
it was 6 point something the first time around. The second time, I'm not going to discuss. But it was fun. I was there to cover the combine as the features editor for NFL.com. So getting a chance to run that for legitimate journalism purposes gave me a very George Plimpton feel that I was, doing something for the good of mankind and showcasing to everybody that this is harder than you think. I still didn't get my stance done properly, and I still don't think I can do it now.
Well, the reason you didn't break a 5 is because the stance wasn't correct. If you had
No,
the right stance, Amar, we know you would have been under 5. You would have easily surpassed Rich Eisen.
That is correct. And I'd like to blame Ben Liebenberg, who's the lead photographer for giving me the wrong steps. But he did take some good photos of me, so I'm always appreciative to him for that.
No question. Always appreciative of you, Amar Shah. And I want to leave you with this final question here. I saw this picture of you when doing my research. You, a young Amar Shah, next to Rick Smits. And what was Rick, like 7'4" at the time? I wanted to live in your world for a moment and see what a wide-eyed Amar Shah was thinking with Rick Smits in his presence, the north of 7 foot guy who obviously played
I'm
many
Dutchman.
Pacers.
It was crazy. So the Indiana Pacers came to our gym to practice in 1995. So I got a chance to kind of hang out there, and then later, meet some of the players and interview them. And um, then Rick Smits was boarding the bus, and my journalism teacher was there, and she's like, "Oh, take a picture." So I stood for the photo, and then I was like, "Oh, cool, picture with Rick Smits." And then when she got it developed, I realized his head got chopped off because he was so tall and I was so short. And it's crazy to look back on it because it's like I was 5'2" or 5'3" at the time, and he's 7'4". So there's a full almost 24 to 30 inches taller than he was for me. But it's still a classic photo because it says so much and it's so 90s, in its nature.
Well, I hope we did a good job of cropping in your career and the breadth of it in this conversation. Amar
Thank
Shah,
you so much.
go buy his book. Everybody, I'm telling you, Wish I Was a Baller. Go follow Amar Shah on Twitter at Amar Shahism. I'm on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. Amar, this has been very enjoyable. It's an honor to have you here for this chat. Really appreciate your time.
Brian, thanks so much. And I look forward to the book being published and you guys reading the story. So thank you again. It's been a pleasure.